Good evening, and welcome to the St. Petersburg by Night podcasting network. Tonight, we present to you our behind-the-scenes show, After Dark.
Welcome to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel, where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida. My name is Kent, also known as Misha Kent on all social media. I am the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night, but tonight I play the role of host, as this is After Dark. It's Saturday night, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for our behind-the-scenes program known as After Dark, where we talk to storytellers, we talk to players, we talk to movers and shakers in the world of darkness. And tonight we have a very special guest, one of our moderators and soon-to-be storytellers on St. Pete by Night. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Krazaz. You've probably seen his name if you're a member of the community, floating about, hanging around in channels, trolling. He is often a guest on many of our streams, and you've seen his face many times before on our program, Don't Get Caught, which airs on Thursday nights and is actually going to be coming to a very, very, very important conclusion soon as the story wraps up and our players are free to move off into the wild to pursue other events and pursuits of their very own. But let's go ahead and have our wonderful guests go ahead and introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Krazaz. I've been playing RPGs and doing role plays for a long time, since I was at least in middle school. And hey, I'm here now. I looked to explore the world of darkness and came here first, and it's been quite the wild ride.
It has been a wild ride, not just for you as a player, but for you as a character. I mean, there's so many things that we're going to talk about tonight as far as your experience is concerned. But before we get into all of that, I'd love to announce to everyone that we are having a giveaway again tonight. So if you are interested in receiving a special prize just for being an amazing viewer, Chromatic Creations, also known as our beloved Crafty, is giving away one free art piece to a member of our live audience tonight who is watching along. All you have to do is put the hashtag Crafty into the chat and you will get a free art piece from Chromatic Creations. It is a single character art piece, but it is full color, and based off of the evolution of her artwork, you're in for a incredible piece of art. There's no doubt about that. So just put in hashtag Crafty in the chat and you could be in the running for that art piece, and we will announce the winner of that giveaway at the end of the stream here tonight. But let's get into our conversation. Krazaz, it's good to see you, buddy. And I really want to start at the very, very beginning of your journey. You kind of gave us a small taste, a small piece of everything. But let's talk about the very, very beginning of it all. When did you first start your TTRPG journey? Not just the World of Darkness, but TTRPGs in general. And had you had any preconceived notions before you decided to jump in yourself? Like, had you heard about it? Had you been exposed to it? And did you have any thoughts about it before trying it yourself?
Okay, so that's quite the question because I like at first it sounded okay, that's not too far back. Okay, now it's getting farther back. It's getting farther back. Okay.
We're going back
So
to the beginning. We got to always
yes.
start at the beginning.
So I have always pretty much my entire life I've been always tabletop adjacent. So my dad was a big big D&D player back in his day. And but he never actually played while I was a child. But he would still maintain his play by mail games. So if anybody doesn't know what that is, it's so you know how people do play by posts on forums and discords. Imagine doing that via mail. And having to have it send all your mail to a game master, or having to mail your compatriots, and planning out moves and waiting 3 weeks or so before it gets here. And he would write for magazines. I have a whole collection of magazines in my closet that the articles my dad wrote and collected. It's insane. And one day I will categorize all that, but that is not today.
Oh no,
Uh,
you got to categorize, you got to archive, and you got to like get digital copies of it because I'd absolutely love to read it. And I am absolutely
yeah.
dating myself here by saying that I remember play by mail. I remember before there was an internet to serve our needs, we would have to do. Okay, yes, that just made me feel ancient. But
So
yeah,
yeah, I
that's so
would.
you've always had kind of that TTRPG influence in your life from the very beginning.
Mhm.
What did you think about it when you were that young? Like knowing being
Oh,
around it, what were your thoughts on it at the time?
I mean, that young, this was very young. So I didn't really understand what was happening or what was going on. It was more something I learned later about. But like the only real memories I had of the time were watching my dad fiddle around with a board game on a dining table, and just planning his next move for his game of uh, uh, I forget what it's called, but it's the really simple one where it's just a map of Europe and you just push your
Oh, for
wood
Risk.
tiles. No, not Risk.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I forget the name. It'll come to me. I think it's like politics or something. You'll get what I mean.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm sure it'll pop up later in my brain or later tonight. But I would eventually. My dad would always have me sitting on his lap as he played his video games. StarCraft was the biggest one that really like drew me in. But the thing that got to me is that I would watch him play two main games that are deep into the D&D side of things, which would be um, the Eye of the Beholder, which was a dungeon crawl, mega dungeon, 12 floors. I've played it many, many times as a teenager and even now. Diplomacy, yes, thank you. Um, and the later one, of course, being the original Baldur's Gate. So my dad would talk about his adventures. He would also would be forum role playing occasionally. I didn't understand what he was doing, but he would be forum role playing as well as doing his what little remained of his play by mail groups. Um, and eventually, I just growing up, I would always be around these sort of D&D things. I'd even play Baldur's Gate myself before I even tried. And it wasn't until I got to college, actually, that I bothered to step into a 3.5 game that my roommate was playing. And then after that was done, they jumped into fifth edition. And I decided to DM it the summer afterward to my friends from high school before we all went our separate ways. And that's what I've been doing since. And then about a year and a half ago, I decided I'm a bit tired of fifth edition, and I just happened to start playing the World of Darkness via the original Bloodlines game after watching a review of it, and then hearing that it was a tabletop game, and it got me more and more interested, and somehow I ended up here.
That's interesting. A lot of people I've talked to have had Bloodlines be their access point to the world of darkness, and it makes sense as it was one of the best RPGs I think ever created, and still
Hmm.
stands the test of time to today. Uh, the fact that we're talking about StarCraft and the original Baldur's Gate being old games has given me aggravated willpower damage. But regardless, so let's talk about that first D&D game, what you can remember of it, when you decided to actually step into it. Do you remember anything about your character, what class you played, any of those details?
Okay, so it's not exactly the best experience. So, um, my the campaign started as like a Faerun adventure, but I wasn't actually part of it yet. Um, instead I was sitting to the side watching while my roommate played with his friends, or he was mostly trying to impress girls, which is weird to say that D&D was trying to impress girls,
In
but
those days,
they
yes.
but he was doing that because he was on the Quidditch team, and of course those are the girls who would be the most adjacent to that culture, so it kind of worked out. Anyway, Quidditch, weird game. If you like soccer, try it, but otherwise don't.
This is live
uh,
action Quidditch we're talking about. Yeah,
yes,
okay,
this is
okay.
this is with poles between your legs running around. But yeah, I tried it a bit. I am not a sporty person. That didn't work out for me. Anyway, anyway, I was watching them, and then what happened is that their characters fell into a homebrew setting, and that's when I joined. So I joined as some homebrew race that was basically kind of gnomes, but they were related to orcs, but they weren't goblins, but they weren't orcs either. It was weird. But my character was a little guy named Garnitel Needlefingers, rogue. Uh, I was stealing stuff. Being that I was being a that guy for a little bit, trying to steal my allies' stuff sometimes, and of course my DM would immediately slap me. No, bad. I'm like, okay, fine.
So a little bit of
But
a chaos gremlin from the get.
oh yeah, yeah. Eventually, I got crushed to death by a trap, but it was mostly a fun time. I managed to write a throwaway character before the big bad final boss, but other than that, it was still a fun time, and I was glad to have participated in that.
So, considering that you had been around it throughout your whole upbringing, did you ever have a desire to get involved, or was it just kind of like your dad's thing that you were, around for, or were you like, when I grow up, this is what I want to be doing this kind of stuff too? Like, did it appeal to you, or was it just your friends are doing it in college, you figure you'll give it a chance then?
Mhm.
What really was the draw?
So I would say that originally it was more of, since my dad never actually played it while I was growing up. It was something in his past.
Oh,
He
okay.
had my dad apparently, not to get too deep into it, but he felt that he had some kind of gaming addiction at one point, and that included, unfortunately, him deciding to burn all of his D&D books, which I wish he didn't
If
do that, because I
now,
would.
if you could have had them now, yeah,
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
oh
If you
yeah. I would love to be flipping through that original AD&D book, but oh well. That
yeah,
that was his decision.
those are
Which.
relics of a bygone era, but that is a very real thing, gaming addiction, and I've known many who have gone through it,
Mhm.
and I understand the struggle that it can be. That escapism can be quite a high for people, and I get why that would draw to some people. So you get into your first game, and not only do you get into a game, you kind of get thrown into the deep end with homebrew right
Mhm.
out the gate. What made you decide during that experience to keep doing it? Did you like have such a good time the first time you decided you wanted to follow up with it, or was it like you knew it, you had this feeling it could be better and you kept chasing it?
So since it had always been like an adjacent existence for me, and I had, not really. I mean, originally, me and my friend group, my original friend group, didn't think it was something that for us we had been, we played Pokemon, we played video games, but it wasn't really like, oh, tabletop. That's something like real nerds do. We're not that big of nerds, but we really were. Um, but I did enjoy my first game, And like I really had to pressure my friends into trying it out, and together we had decided, okay, this was for us. This was something to do. And I've always been a natural storyteller. Like I said, I've been forum role playing at this point for a while, well before I started actual D&D. So I had been doing completely systemless or something I just made up system. Uh, and like, okay, so I had actually invented a D&D light for myself without any context of D&D whatsoever. I rolled D6s by myself to roll for people's shit when they did stuff in my silly bird setting on an island that I made up. And, you know, it worked out. People liked it. So, and I kept teasing a sequel, but I never did do it. And then D&D came around, and that pulled me away from trying to write a whole other system.
Well, and that's kind of the thing with tabletop role playing games and role playing in general is it harkens back to something that I think we all have experienced at one time or another as growing up and as children, which is we're playing pretend. I mean, at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, it's really you are just playing pretend or acting and adding mechanics to it, adding a sense of chaos and chance to it with the addition of dice and whatnot. But this isn't an unfamiliar concept, it's just evolved. It's like playing
Mm-hmm.
pretend plus, and you add paper and you add pencils and you add dice to it. But really, it's something that
Yeah.
I think we've all experimented with in our time, and I think that it is very cool that you already were kind of adapting the concepts of tabletop gaming on your own before jumping
Mm-hmm.
into an organized structure. That shows that you kind of had a mind for it or a knack for it pretty early on, and then it just evolved into being D&D. What would you say is your favorite D&D class?
Yikes. I don't know if I really have one. I think that pretty much I don't think I've the only class I don't think I've actually played myself is a bard. But
Okay.
every other class I have played to some extent. I think that probably the cleric kit is probably the most adaptable one. Um, but ultimately, within the purely the context of fifth edition, um, I think just any kind of spellcaster really. So I guess wizards. But you know what? I'll just say cleric. Let's just say cleric.
Cleric. Okay.
Yeah.
Cleric is a
Um.
pretty versatile cast or class because you can get
Mhm.
tank clerics, you can get more damage based clerics, you can get obviously the healers that everybody tends to avoid, and there
Mhm.
are a lot of possibilities within that class. But it's also a class that is kind of always in demand, always needed. So
Right.
it's a really good way to fit into any game, is if you're willing to come in and play the cleric for one reason or another. Is
Yeah.
there a particular setting that you like? Do you prefer to tend to go towards homebrew, or do you like the Faerun setting or the Eberron setting?
I have my own setting that I've partially developed with friends, but it mostly fell onto me. But we have quite the extensive lore, and it's been our main campaign setting for pretty much ever since I first did that game of my own after after that first campaign with my roommates. We've just been building on it ever since, and I've got a whole extensive lore, and we have several different pantheons of gods, and we have several campaigns worth of material that we've gone through. I've got a world anvil page that I've done. There's like a dragon Jesus, and there's like a there's like different there's a whole other goblin race that showed up because they were frozen in time. There's all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And you know, like a part of me like thinks like, oh man, Forgotten Realms is such an underused setting. They really, it really feels like, oh, here it's the basic backdrop of any D&D module, and yet like I feel like I should know more, but yet I don't. And that's from someone who's played through Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and Eye of the Beholder, and through several of the older RPGs, and yet I'm like, what is going on in the Red Wizards of Thay? What is going on in Thay? What's happening? There's like undead or something. Like they have that guy in the things showing up in the movie, but they don't talk about it.
Right.
Like maybe we need more material like that. Maybe we need to actually explore the setting other than the Sword Coast and Waterdeep. I don't
Well,
know.
it's interesting too because I feel like Forgotten Realms and Faerun is one of the most developed settings, like on par with a World of Darkness. Like they put a
Mm-hmm.
lot of lore and a lot of thought and a lot of love into it, and there's so many novels and books and supplements about it. But it
Yeah.
is one that I think that people have either shied away from or lost interest in over time because it was always the backdrop. Most of the religions in a lot of the core
Mm-hmm.
books through the editions were based off of the Forgotten Realms lore and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's a very fascinating setting with a very rich history. But it's true they do tend to stick to a certain region and don't go into developing the other regions as well as they could,
Mm-hmm.
especially recently. But yeah, it's a wonderful setting. But I always am impressed by people who choose to develop their own settings instead. And it sounds like
Mm-hmm.
you've put a lot of thought into yours. Where do you get a lot of your inspiration for the creations that you make? What do you have anything that inspires you or that you draw from in the creation of the things that you make?
I don't. I try not to think so. I mean, I'm sure there are. Like, you can't not have inspiration.
Right.
Like everything's derivative of something, and I don't know. Like, I guess I've always had context of okay, here's what a dragon is. Dragons are raw. So, if you have like half the setting that's from my friend Alex, he is he's a very heavy into the dragon lore, and so like pretty much his entire continent slash pantheon is dragon based. As for myself, and he read Aragon, so like there's a reason why. As for myself, I mean, I don't delve too much into fiction anymore beyond I don't know like Lord of the Rings and stuff. Like I haven't actually I've read parts of the first book, but never actually finished the books. But I've seen the movies. I've read a good chunk of the Harry Potter series, but I don't think that's a direct inspiration for me, other than magic schools exist.
Right.
Um, I guess those early D&D playthroughs through Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, as well as I the Beholder did, because like I have had a fascination with Beholders as a result of the final boss of that game, the original Xanathar, not this weird one that they keep popping up everywhere
Right.
in marketing.
So I know that you also have a really strong interest with religion. You mentioned that you
Mm-hmm.
created all these religions and you're actually a theology major, I believe, or at least you're studying theology to
Yeah.
some degree. What drew you to that kind of realm of study? What was it about religions and whatnot that kind of drew your eye and your interest?
So I guess some context. First, it is religious studies major. I actually graduate next week, and I'll be getting that degree. My first degree was in anthropology. So I am an archaeologist. I have done archaeological digs. But to in further context, and this is ironic, but I am personally an atheist. I don't believe in gods, but the idea it fascinates me, as well as I've always been interested in mythologies and uh, all kinds of things like that. The impact, the historical impact of religious backgrounds as well has been more than enough of a interest for me, because that's a big intersection. Pretty much every culture on this planet has had some kind of religion, and their religions has impacted other cultures. So I look to combine everything as well, and you know, both from like religious content as well as atheistic content, learning all the ins and outs of what is what, and you know, I think just the world is fascinating, and I think seeing fiction and how everything is goddamn derivative from religion is absolutely interesting, and it makes me think, wow, people really can't be more creative, can they?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and honestly, first off, congratulations on the accomplishment of graduating college. Like, I think a lot of people undervalue how much of a
Twice.
commitment that is for the second time. Yeah. And it's an incredible achievement. So, congratulations on that. But to your point, I do think religious studies is a fascinating subject. It was one of my favorite classes in college. I didn't do the whole degree, but the religion class that I took was absolutely fascinating because it does shape culture. It has such an impact on the way different cultures and different areas see the world, and it tells a lot about their history and what they've been through and the different stories that they teach, even though there are similarities through a lot of the religions of just like, don't be a dick, be a good person, maybe. I
Yep.
do think that there is such cool intricacies and details to those religions and where things get inspired and where they evolve over time. It is fascinating, and it does have a really strong impression on things like D&D and on things like World of Darkness. You can feel the fingerprints of various cultures and religions all throughout those works and the mythology of those works, and I think it's fascinating, and to have that level of knowledge and understanding must be another source of inspiration for you creatively that you can take from the things that you've learned from real world religions and cultures and kind of incorporate that into your own creative thought process.
Mhm. Oh yeah. I mean, I've definitely been brewing around characters now that I have gone through this religious studies degree that play more off of those ideas and take more of those stuff that's been lost to time that I've been uncovering through my studies. That might be that a vampire would remember or would think about. One of the things I've always wanted to see in the World of Darkness setting is what exactly like the impact of Christ and the rise of Christianity was to the kindred. When it sounds like, I mean, like we see what happens in Dark Ages, sure, and that was not very long ago for them, but you would have to think like that had to have been a big freaking deal to them. And it, like, I haven't looked much into Dark Ages, but it feels like that's a frame of reference we need to see more.
Dark Ages is definitely, and it's harder to get access to now except through PDFs of the older edition books, but that is going to be your best access point into the Inquisition, into the effect that religion had on the overall World of Darkness setting. Also, I would definitely recommend looking more into Clan Lasombra because Clan Lasombra is very
Mm-hmm.
closely entwined with the religion and with the bishops and the cardinals and everything of the old
Mm-hmm.
Christian faith and Catholic faith. So I think that's a really good access point. But Dark Ages would be your major starting point in regards to finding the crossover between religion and World of Darkness. That being
Yeah.
said, you became a dungeon master of
Mm-hmm.
D&D. What inspired you to do that? Because that is a very kind of bold and courageous step to take. It's very intimidating prospect to go from player to storyteller or to dungeon master. What encouraged you or what incentivized you to take that step?
So I would consider myself one of those people who just naturally inclined to do it. Like, uh, I'm more inclined to take the narrative into my control. I'm a natural storyteller, and not just in the World of Darkness sense, in the meta sense. So like at this point, I had already, like I said, been doing the forum role playings. Shout outs to my boys at Half Moon Academy, by the way. That's a wild ride in itself. Um, anyway, so the uh, I had already been doing forum role playing. I had already run my own games in those forum role plays. Like I said, I half developed a pseudo D&D at one point myself, and it just felt like an easy step for me to take because I was already on that journey as is. It was just actually learning the system of fifth edition and 3.5 for that matter, uh, and just picking up the book and going with it. Uh, that's all it took for me.
Did you feel like that was challenging to try and learn a system, or did you find that what was the biggest hill that there was for you to climb in regards to becoming a DM or a storyteller?
I guess it was more finding what exactly my comfort zone is in regards to like how do I plan a session? Like how do I go all out? Should I prepare for every single detail? What if they don't do that thing? You know, all that stuff. Um and I hate to admit it, but I am not exactly the most plan heavy I found myself to be. I'm not exactly the most planning heavy. I'm much more of an improviser when it comes to my storytelling, when it comes to my DMing. I much prefer to think of things on the fly. I've thought up whole puzzles on the fly. Uh, but sometimes, you know, you have to sit back and be like, okay, I actually want to make a dungeon, and I'm going to sit down and make a dungeon. And sometimes I'll sit down and make a puzzle. I'll go buy a thing, or I'll go find something around my house and be like, okay, this is going to be my puzzle element. And you know, and I've made some good puzzles with that, and you know, I've figured out what to do and how to prepare. I have what exactly my way of it's more of the meta textual aspect of DMing, more less so than the actual. Let's get a story going, and you know, like the ooh, this is big, scary, and learning system. It was more like, what exactly do I need to do to become a good DM?
What do you remember about the first story you ever ran or the first campaign you ran, within the D&D system? What do you recall from that time period?
So this had to have been just after sophomore year of college. I got my buddies from my hometown together. Um, and it eventually grew to a really big table. That's also where I learned my limits on how many people I want at my tables. My maximum is 8, and that's still a big number.
Still a big number.
Anyway, it was started out as let's open up the monster manual, let's grab a cool monster and have it be our BG. And that ended up being a genie Dow, Earth genie, essentially. And you know, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to have them go search a mine, and there's going to be methods everywhere. If you don't know, that's those like baby elementals, basically. And they went in, and they were supposed to like uh, kill them all. You know, just a pretty simple like baby dungeon. And at the end, they went and found, oh, there's the Dow there. Oh, he's collecting something. He's about to murder all of you. And then they got Deus Ex Machina out, and that's how I established. Oh, there's actually like a wizard college, and and you have to be a registered spellcaster in order to be a legal spellcaster, and they track you. And that's how they got them out of there. And so my world building came naturally that way. Okay, there's now a registration system. There's now wizard colleges. Let's go. And eventually more people joined. We had an actual party going. We had like an ambitious little dude that was a paladin. Eventually there was like they had to confront an ogre and his boar, and they killed the ogre, and the boar got away. And eventually, when they finished a dungeon, which was a big wizard tower, and it was their encounters were way too hard. But when they got out of that dungeon and got the next piece of this hammer that was like some older adventurers, because that's what the genie was gathering, was pieces to a hammer. But they got the rod, they got the staff, the wizard staff, and they would get at, and they once they got out of that dungeon, they came across the boar again, but he would turn into a wereboar, and it was crazy. I loved that interaction. Uh, but
So it
eventually,
seemed like you would take
yeah.
a concept and expand upon it, and then expand upon it some more. As a fellow, improv DM storyteller, I totally understand that. Of like, okay, inspiration strikes at the strangest times. When you plan down to the very minute or down to the very encounter, I feel like it can be very limiting in that kind of inspiration because you're so focused about staying on this particular path. But
Yeah.
one thing that I've learned about players over 30 plus years of running games is that they're always going to do the opposite of what you think they're going to do. They're always going to find the one crack you didn't plan for, or the one avenue you
Mm-hmm.
didn't plan for, and that's where they're going to want to go. And yeah, there's ways to navigate them back to the path, but I think that it is a talent that doesn't necessarily come naturally. It's something that's learned, and it's really impressive to hear that right out the gate. You'd already learned some of those lessons of just like let the players do their things, and you can think a step or two ahead of them and still run a very good game without knowing what the end result is going to be. And being able to take these concepts and just expand them, that can be very exciting for you as a storyteller, but also can be very exciting for them as players.
Oh yeah.
So you spent a few years running D&D. When did World of Darkness specifically come across your radar? When had you first heard about it? When did you take interest in it, and what made you decide to pursue it as an option?
I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think it was mostly my coming across Bloodlines. So
Right.
I had originally come across Bloodlines. I think it was definitely a YouTube review. I think specifically, um, forgetting his name, but he did one, and then some other creators were doing some in a relatively close time span, and I kept watching and I kept watching and I kept seeing like, oh yeah, play the Malkavian. They've got a weird they've do that after you've played a normal game, of course, but after you play the Malkavian, it's crazy. And if you want to play hard mode, play Nosferatu. And I'm just like, okay, this is actually like a very interesting game, because a lot of people around the same time they're like, this is a hidden gem, go play it. And I usually, when it comes to those YouTube reviews of big long RPGs, I don't think about, okay, again, I'm going to actually go play it. I usually just be like, okay, that's cool. But this one in particular grabbed me, and I'm like, okay, let's see what this is going for. And I downloaded it, and I played it on Steam, and it was a wild ride. I loved every second of it. I'm just like, okay, this is an actual tabletop RPG, and I'll put it on the back burner, something I'll have in mind. And then maybe like a year or two later, after playing D&D, and I'm just tired of it. I know, as much as I hate to say it, my own personal friend group isn't the best at the role playing aspect, and role playing has been the main thing for RPGs for me since the beginning. Because, like I said, I played mechanicalist for role plays for a long time. Um, but eventually I just went like, okay, I'm done with D&D for a little bit. I'm just gonna take a little breather, and I'm gonna look around. And I posted the World of Darkness subreddit, and then suddenly I get a DM from Mimic, and I ended up here.
And the rest is history. Yeah, it's interesting. Like D&D is a very crunchy system, having come from a war game and been mostly strategy that it turned into story and turned into role playing. But there is a lot of mechanics that come with D&D, and I know I'm going to get some hate for this, but there is such a thing as too much D&D.
Oh yeah.
Once you've played it enough back to back, multiple campaigns back to back, or side by side, it can get to a point where it's just like you've hit a wall where you've
Yeah.
done everything, you've tried everything, you've experienced most of it, and it is good to take a break from it and take a breather from it. Bloodlines was very interesting because it was a game that, or one of the first early on RPG games, I feel like, that gave you a unique path on a similar story. Like a lot of these RPG games, you're just playing the same story out no matter what. But with Bloodlines, the way you played the story varied drastically based off of what clan you chose. Like you said, the Malkavian was such a unique story in comparison to like the Bruja or the Toreador or the Ventru. And the Nosferatu, hard mode, absolutely, but it also encouraged you to explore new places that you wouldn't have necessarily gone as any of the other character clans. And
Right.
so it was a different game every time you played it. And with that, even within that, you could have a different game with how you took that path with each of the clans as well. So it was such a great. It felt truly like role playing. It felt truly immersive in that quality, and it was just a very unique and amazing game.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think that's one of the hardest things about video games, is that it's really hard to capture that role play aspect. And
mhm.
Bloodlines 1 did it so well. And I don't know how exactly they did it, what exactly in the writing did it the best, but something did. And that's what captured the imaginations. And that's why a lot of people aren't exactly looking forward to be it Bloodlines 2, because it doesn't look like it
It's got a
captures
lot of
that same
pressure. It's got a
feeling. A
lot of
lot of
pressure.
pressure. Okay.
Yeah.
And it. And to be clear, I played a Tremere on that my run that I played through it. So I got to go to the Chantry and have cool bald wizard daddy Strauss, I think
Yep,
Strauss, something like that.
Strauss.
Yeah, and that was interesting. I never did get around to doing a second playthrough fully as a different clan, but I feel like that was enough to get me very much interested, and I'm really enjoying fifth edition so far. I don't. I've not experienced the full version of V20 or before, but the blood dice system of V5 is really interesting, and I really like it.
Well, one of the things that appealed to me about fifth edition was how streamlined and accessible it was. It was an easier to teach version of the system than any other version I'd seen before. 20th anniversary, also known as third edition, second edition, first edition, they were all very crunchy systems in their own right as well. And having seen so many people talking about this game and wanting to access this game, I was like, we've got to find a way to make this easy to teach 90 to 200 people in a rather quick amount of time. And so, yeah, I do really appreciate the fifth edition version of the system because of how much it does take mechanics, but it takes them and softens them a lot more and makes them a little more versatile and able to be suited towards any situation. Mimic reached out to you, encouraged you to come join. Talk about that time period, that process of entering into the server and getting into the game and learning about the game. What was that like for you as opposed to your journey with D&D and TTRPGs as a whole before that?
So I knew coming in from the bat that it wasn't going to be like your traditional D20 system. I wouldn't say explored. I had watched playthroughs, watched more like listened, of other games. So I've heard about Paranoia. I've heard about Call of Cthulhu. Had I not heard about World of Darkness, I probably would be playing Call of Cthulhu right now. But like I fully expected, it to have tabletop elements, but I wasn't really didn't know exactly what I was coming in through. I wasn't about to have bloodlines color my expectations of what the actual tabletop was like. Um, if I don't know if you remember, but I had come in at the very tail end of the prevamp,
Yep.
and so I quickly made a character, and unfortunately, it was right when you were going on vacation, I think.
Yep.
So unfortunately, I was in like a limbo with my character, and I couldn't really go anywhere. I couldn't do anything because I couldn't make the prints yet. And it felt like you guys implemented that there was like a rule like you could have a chaperone,
Right.
but it still felt like it was a little too late because as soon as you got back and as soon as I got introduced to the Prince Isabel, it was like, oh yeah, by the way, we're revamping the whole thing. And so I wouldn't want to say wasting my time, and because it sounds like you guys would have been lovely to play with. But instead of feeling like I wouldn't have that much time to develop my character within the time frame that this revamp was happening, and even that I didn't really understand how long this revamp was going to take between the announcement and the actual execution. Uh, but like I decided, okay, let's wait. I was very tempted to go look around for a different table. I was very tempted, but in the meantime,
Understandably.
I was playing D&D with my friends still. I was I was playing. I was biding my time, and eventually the revamp was finished. I jumped at the chance to get a table, and I ended up with Crafty as my ST, and I enjoyed what I did of Duncan Cott. Rex was a great character, and I enjoyed the story.
So with Don't Get Caught being your kind of real initiation into World of Darkness, because revamp things ran very differently in the prevamp than they did in the
Mm-hmm.
revamp, and I think the revamp gives a more authentic World of Darkness experience, more realistic and reasonable World of Darkness experience
Mm-hmm.
than the prevamp did. talk me through what kind of was the motivation for Rex as a character. For those who are watching, if you haven't checked out Don't Get Caught, all the episodes are on YouTube and Twitch. You can go back and watch the entire story. It is coming to a conclusion with episode 30, which is an incredible accomplishment, not just for Crafty as a storyteller, but for you as players. That is a long-running chronicle, believe it or not. Most chronicles don't last that long, so it's really impressive to see that you made it all the way through. But in the creation of Rex, what was the motivation? Why did you choose Clan Nosferatu? Why did you make Rex the way you did? Like, what was the inspiration behind that?
Okay, so a Rex originally was going to be a Ravnos, but uh, the server rules at the time were basically like, oh, let's have Ravnos be a restricted clan because of obvious historical, problems with that clan. And so one of the main factors I picked Ravnos for was I was interested in the unliving hive discipline. It was an amalgam power of animalism and obfuscate. Um, and Ravnos was one path, but the Nosferatu was the other. And I was like, I don't really want to be, the ugly guy. I want to be the cool like spider guy. That's why Recluse was his street name. Um, but eventually my own laziness got over me because like Crafty originally was like, give me like a really good backstory for him, and maybe I'll let you play Ravnos. And I was like, no, no laziness, no, I okay, fine, I'll play a Nosferatu. Let's go. And I don't regret the decision at all. Rex was a great character. At first, I kind of built him because I saw that obfuscate or that the actual Living Hive power was going to be a while. But I combined the concepts that I had for my backup Nosferatu and the original Ravnos character together. But originally, I was, and if you watch that first episode of Don't Get Caught, you'll see that I'm trying to, or the first like 3-ish. You'll see originally I'm trying to, just stay as the party rogue. I'm going to just do my job and stay out of everybody else's way. But whether or not Crafty intended it or not, uh, street respected street, Marcos handed me the keys to the New Haven. And slowly over time, I was getting more and more respect from people. And eventually I'm like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to step up to the plate and take over and not let, the obvious Ventru pick take over. I very much enjoyed my time with Rex, and and eventually leadership became I want to be there, and I was kind of cheered on by my other players, of course, to do that before we even considered it in character. But I'm like, you know what, screw it, let's go, let's be a new bear.
Well, and I love the not taking that Nosferatu angle and taking a Nosferatu on as your first challenge, because one thing that I've learned about World of Darkness as a whole is you want the imperfect characters. The more flaws, the better. This was a thing in the older editions that I hope that they'll eventually bring into the newer editions, is you would load your character up with flaws on purpose. You don't want a character who's winning at everything. You want a character that has obstacles to overcome. And I feel like the Nosferatu are a very, very underrated clan. Because people do say, well, they're ugly, so they're going to be no fun to play. I want to play a pretty vampire. And I think that the Nosferatu are some of the coolest characters ever. I definitely encourage people to take that Nosferatu angle, because there are ways and things you can do with the Nosferatu that you just can't do with any other clan as effectively as you can with them. I had the fortune of being able to guest star in a lot of your sessions and get to see the evolution of the characters and the evolution of your story over time. And it was a lot of fun watching Rex's growth and watching his evolution. And you also have the advantage, believe it or not, of having a complete story with Rex from start to finish. One of the things that people don't recognize or realize is, like, so many stories in TTRPGs go unfinished for one reason or another. You don't get closure on characters because campaigns get dropped, or something happens, or scheduling happens, and sessions get canceled left and right until it eventually peters out. But you got the experience to have a full story with a character, and I always think that that is a beautiful thing. Even if it's cut short or it's end tragically for one reason or another, there is something to be said for being able to put that all to bed and just say, hey, I played this character through to the end. And I think there's something just really, really cool about that. I know there were still a lot of unfulfilled ambitions for Rex, but I think that his actions and what happened because of that character is still going to be felt for a long time to come in the overall St. Pete universe, as it were. And people will learn more about that as they watch the last couple of episodes of Don't Get Caught and going into the shows beyond that.
St. Petersburg by Night is brought to you through collaborations with our partnered vendors, Wolfpack Dice, Ember Fox Dice, Dragon Ink Dice, Bear the Bard, Champs Tramps, Penshi Artista, and Chromatic Creations. Links to our partnered vendors, as well as our Twitch and YouTube channels, can be found on our website, stpbynight.com. The official theme song for St. Petersburg by Night is Vampire by Faith and Failure. You could find them at faithandfailure.com. You can follow St. Pete by Night on all socials with the hashtag St. Pete by Night. If you wish to support our program, you could do so at coffee.com/St. Pete by Night to help keep the stories rolling.
So you've played through the game. You've now had almost a full year of experience in St. Pete under your belt. And I asked you if you had any interest in becoming a storyteller, and you said you did, which I think is very exciting. What is something that you're looking forward to about becoming a storyteller, and maybe something that you are a little apprehensive about in becoming a storyteller?
I think my most apprehensive aspect is the nitty gritty of the systems. I'm not 100% sure on how combat works. I think, and it doesn't help that I say that that's a bad way to phrase it. Don't Get Caught often didn't delve into combat until the later half of it, and even then, I don't fully understand the system. I think it also doesn't help that our book isn't exactly the best formatted. Um, uh, I think another like flaw of it is like there isn't really a monster manual
No.
to this game, at least not yet. Maybe they plan on doing something, but like that was one of the main ways of okay, let's go find a BPG. Is I'd flip through a monster book and go point to one and be like, that's it. And it's a little harder here because it's not as straightforward. But as for what I'm looking forward to, I'm definitely looking forward to stretching my legs in this setting. I'm looking forward to incorporating aspects of the modern world and being able to make political commentary on on parts of our reality that can be reflected in Kindred Society. I'd love to explore the history of Kindred Society from a modern lens and question aspects of the World of Darkness in character. If I do get around to playing werewolf, I definitely want to have somebody who's definitely questioning how things work or why are we doing this. It's definitely it's definitely a wide array of things I can do here.
So I want to talk about kind of the differences, what you like and dislike between the differences between D&D and World of Darkness. But before we get to that, I'm going to mention again that we are having a giveaway tonight. One of our live viewers can earn a free piece of artwork from our gifted artist, Crafty and Chromatic Creation. She's offering one free art piece, full color, single character, to a viewer tonight. All you have to do is put the hashtag crafty into the chat and we will do that drawing at the end of the night. But if you want a character artwork, it doesn't have to be limited to World of Darkness. It could be D&D, it could be anything that your crazy creative mind can think of, but she will create one piece of artwork for you tonight. Just put the hashtag crafty in the chat and we will draw the winner of that at the end of the evening. So let's talk about the transition from D&D to World of Darkness. You've had a year now, so you've had a lot more time to experience, the widths and depths of the system, whether it's through one-shots or through your campaign and Don't Get Caught. What was the easiest to adjust to with World of Darkness, and what was one of the more difficult things to adjust to coming from a D&D background?
I guess the easiest thing um was to be able to talk within the frame of reference of our modern world, since we live in it. It's easy to bring up those topics. It's easy to think about it. I think it was it's easy to find a niche that you don't really play in D&D. Like, how many people in D&D play a drug dealer, like actively play a drug dealer? And that's something that that was the center of Rex's identity, was the fact that he was a drug dealer. I mean, sure, that you probably get your your single comedy scene of, oh, let's go. We just got some drugs in our D&D setting, or cool magic drugs. Let's go sell them real quick, or do them. And we had a moment in our first campaign like that. But that wasn't something you actively did. You don't have that. And even outside of that context, you could be like an office worker and have to deal with two layers of bureaucratic bullshit. There's all kinds of good things that you could do here that D&D just doesn't do. As for things that held me back, that took me a while to figure out, one of the aspects, and maybe this is just like because we were doing it for Twitch, but the whole vignettes and the idea of pacing was scary to me when I was playing originally. Like, I don't know if you remember my first Storyteller meeting that I had with you guys, but I had mentioned like, oh, I don't want to like sidetrack too hard from the main story. Like I was like, and I was anxious that we were spending too much time role playing and not enough time, doing the plot. Because
Right.
when you're playing D&D, you often like, okay, we need to move to the next thing. We need to go. We need to get we need to finish the story for our DM. But at least with the format we have presented here, we can take our time. We can sit back. We can spend the first half of the session just chilling out or accomplishing goals behind the scenes, and not necessarily going up to the bad guy and fighting and trying to do a whole dungeon crawl. We can actually sit back. We can talk to each other. We can talk here. And it took me forever to be like, okay, first half of the session is just the fun role plays / vignettes. The second half is the let's get to work.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, is that I feel like the encouragement in World of Darkness is more on the individual character's growth and journey versus the party trying to accomplish a task. Now, you can run World of Darkness that way, but I've found that it's a lot more rewarding and enriching when you do add that personal element of like your character's specific story. It's like it allows everyone to be the main character and no one to be the main character at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
by shining that spotlight on the individual characters and showing their growth. And I think it does make those characters more enriched and fulfilling when they do get to have that kind of personal focused attention that World of Darkness brings. Now, I've seen also storytellers do it in D&D or in other gaming systems just as well. I think it's just a certain story style that certain DMs or storytellers incorporate, but it's much more encouraged in World of Darkness than I think I've seen it ever encouraged in any other system since. That it is
Mm-hmm.
like your character's personal journey is the focus, and there might be a meta plot in the background that's running about that's affecting everyone, but as a whole, it's really like, what is your character's ambition? What's your character's desire? I mean, those are things that mechanics in the game that other games don't really have to the same length and breadth as World of Darkness does. Also,
Mm-hmm.
to your point about it being set in our world, I have found that so much easier to tell stories in. Like with D&D, yes, there are some great stories that can be told, but everyone's going to have a differing vision as to what that looks like. Or, most people are going to fall within the like typical fantasy mindset. Like they're going to paint the Lord of the Rings color over everything, or they're going to paint, Aragon or whatever the case may be. It requires a lot more visualizing and creativity and a little bit more like pushing outside of the norm and trying to picture things with your own lens. Whereas in the World of Darkness, like everybody knows what a major city looks like. And if they don't, they can look it up. They can go to Google Maps and see, that what that particular intersection looks like or what these buildings look like. And I think that it's cool that it rides that line of reality and fiction at the same time. That you can come to St. Pete, for example, and walk the streets where the stories have taken place, or go to the business, and go to the Dali Museum where countless Elysiums were held, and you get to see it and feel it and smell it, and really fully become immersed in the environment. I think that's just a cool thing that World of Darkness offers that, again, very few other games do. But it also does make the escapism a little more difficult because you can play through the bureaucracy of an office job. You can, you know, deal with the real world problems that we're all dealing with as it happens. So it is a very very fine line to walk. But I do think that it makes it an even more enjoyable experience if it's something that you can tangibly understand versus having to really flex those creative muscles and think like, okay, what does this medieval village look like? What does this fantastical castle look like? I've never been to a castle. Like, you really have to stretch your creative muscles in that case. But okay, so now with you wanting to become a storyteller and with you having to adopt and adapt to these creative struggles, what are some story elements you think you'd like to explore? Trying to stay away from any spoilers for the stories you want to tell. What are some things that you're looking forward to kind of delving into more?
Um, I'm going to answer your question, but I'd like to during your talk there, I was reminded of one of my biggest inspirations, and
Please.
that would be the game Heroes in Might and Magic 3.
Okay.
Excellent game, excellent game. If you haven't played it, it's old, but it's beautiful, amazing artwork, and it has a lot of high fantasy elements that are amazing. That's enough for spiel for now. To answer your actual question, the thing I want to explore with at least one of the games I want to play here, is I really like the one aspect that interests me the most about V5, as I've heard about it from people who've talked about V20 and the past stuff like you do, is and the fact that we had rules against it for a while, uh, is the fact that V5 really wants to explore the idea of the blood being thin, the idea that things are crossing over, the clan lines aren't as rigid anymore. People can start learning things that they shouldn't have had access to. And so I want to play off that and expand that into, let's play with old versus new. Let's introduce some older kindred that are used to those rigid systems and have them face the fact that uh, that some people can do things that they weren't supposed to be able to do, that these new blooded kindred are doing. Let's have some ancient evil rear its ugly head and go like, the hell is this? Thin bloods? What are these? What are these amalgam powers? What are you doing? So I want to play with older bloodlines, older ideas, and have them face this new reality. That's one of the main ideas I want to do.
So with the World of Darkness, one of the big kind of intimidating aspects of it is the lore. People find the lore can be either really, really interesting and exciting, and they're happy to go down those White Wolf Wiki rabbit holes, or they can look at it and be like, I can't even go near that. That's too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much information. How does lore play into your personal experience with the World of Darkness? How do you feel about lore? How do you feel about the use of it and the storytelling of it? Is it something that interests you and intrigues you and that you look more into, or is it something that you kind of try to shy away from because of how insanely intense it is?
Okay, I'm a big lore guy, so as a consequence of being a natural storyteller, I also like to learn as much as I can about a setting. I definitely did the wiki deep dive of White Wolf. I can I can tell you about how you're wrong in Zelda multiple ways if you try to make a Zelda based homebrew. I do see that there's a lot, but I'm used to Warhammer 40,000 lore, and that's as big, if not bigger, than a library than World of Darkness has. So, like, this isn't unusual or uncomfortable for me. I mean, I definitely should look into the actual like published fiction and stuff. But other than that, like this isn't that scary, is what I'm trying to say.
That's
I
good.
see it, and I definitely would like to explore more. Um,
Yeah, so let's take a detour really quick off of World of Darkness because I know Warhammer 40K, you, even as a viewer on previous After Darks, have asked before, like, what's your Warhammer 40K group? Or, you've asked questions about that. You also are a moderator on a Discord channel for Warhammer 40K. Tell me, what is it that you like most about Warhammer? What is it that pulled you in with that particular setting and that particular game? Because it's still a game that to this very day I don't fully comprehend or don't fully understand. I've played a variety of games, but I don't quite get Warhammer. So maybe you can give me a drive-through education on Warhammer and what appeals mostly to you about it and what made you want to pursue it.
I mean, I wouldn't want us to be here for another hour.
That's why I say
But
drive-through. Just give me the
the
fries in a
drive-through,
bag and send me on my way. What's
I mean, to tell you, I had my dad when we were traveling across states. That alone was a 6-hour drive, I think, and that was a drive-through
oh my goodness.
explanation. Um, uh, 40K is quite the setting, and that's not even talking about fantasy or Sigmar. It's it pulls from a lot of sources. It's everything you can think about in fantasy. Slap some sci-fi armor and guns onto it, and call it a day is the simplest way I can say it. And it's a war game, and if you're, it's an easy thing to be like, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, it's a whole, it's a whole thing. And that's not even talking about Horus Heresy either, because that's its own whole rabbit hole. There are several rabbit holes to go down when it comes to 40K. And the best thing you can do is to just focus on your guys and figure out what's cool about your guys.
Yeah, so from what I
Um,
understand, it's like an army building game where you're going to get certain pieces that you can bring onto the board, certain units that you can bring onto the board, and it's really a lot more about the war strategy, like your army versus another army. It feels like it has elements of Magic the Gathering kind of in it, where that's more card based, but the concept is the same. Is that like you're a commander on one side, they're a commander on the other side. You're bringing out pieces as you can, and you're kind of moving your army in tactical motions to try and defeat the other army. Is that pretty baseline understanding
mhm.
correct, or am I off base on that?
Yeah, you get your army together. You have different squads. You take out your measuring tape and you move a certain amount of inches. You roll a bunch of dice to see if you hit. You roll a bunch of dice to see if you wound, and then they roll a bunch of dice to see if their armor saves them or not. And you pluck down the wounds and you take away models and see. And there's objectives to score. It's not just straight killing.
Right.
There's like sometimes you'll have a deck, and then the different objectives will change over time, and you'll have to move so that you can try to outscore your opponent.
So yeah, I know original
It's
D&D had a lot of that as well. Like really first version of D&D, it was a
yeah,
wartime strategy game. It wasn't as much about dungeon delving and stuff that came later. But
yeah.
OG D&D was kind of the same war strategy. You have an army, you're trying to accomplish objectives and to finish this, to compete against other armies that are doing something similar. So it does sound like it's that with extra steps, obviously, and with advancements that have come over time, but that seems to be the baseline of it.
Yeah, D&D started as a expansion slash spinoff of their game Chainmail, which was primarily medieval fantasy, but Gygax relented and said, "Okay, you guys can include your silly wizards." And so most of the most famous spells in D&D, especially Fireball and Lightning Bolt, were just re-flavored rules for siege weaponry.
Right.
That's why Fireball is a big freaking explosion, is because it was literally a catapult shot retextured. It's just that, oh, this simple pamphlet of rules that was just a derivative because people wanted to, okay, let's go explore this cave so that we can get some more relics for our army, became more popular and more profitable than just publishing your the actual war game element that came from that. And it's funny because the first edition of 40K Rogue Trader also had elements of tabletop RPG in it, and it didn't know what it was at first because these were people who were originally, GW was originally called TSR UK, and they were originally just distributors for TSR stuff. And to the point where very famous monsters, such as the Githyanki, which are very relevant to Baldur's Gate 3, were originally published in Games Workshop's White Dwarf magazine. And were accumulated together into the Fiend Folio, as much as those readers submitted monsters may or may not have been compensated for their creative works that are now forever part of D&D. So it's these are very tied together systems that you can't exactly fully separate it. Warhammer Fantasy originally started as these people's D&D setting. They just decided to take the races and put a fancy hat on top and call it a day.
Add some guns and some explosions and some other army tactics. But yeah, I know that Warhammer also developed into a TTRPG game where it does kind of go into more of the story element and the individual character element than the overall war game. But it does seem like the two do work hand in hand with one another to a certain degree, and that there is a lot that ties the two of them together. But Warhammer has such an intense following. You can't go into a gaming store without seeing at least one table, one of those landscape tables that are prepared for like a Warhammer or one of the many other similar style games. Like I know they have Star Wars versions now. I know they have Lord of the Rings versions where it's the minis, the armies, the whole deal. And I think that it is a really cool and interesting way to play the game. Oh yeah, there you go.
That's Saruman.
So it obviously inspired a style of play. I don't think it's something you could do with World of Darkness, but I don't know. I'd be very interested to see if there were a way to make it happen. But it's very cool.
It would have to be in Dark Ages. That's the only way
for
you
sure.
have it pull it off.
For sure. So tell me about the community that you moderate for, because it was a lot of that moderation experience in that community that kind of drew me to making you a moderator for our server.
So to be specific, at this point, I am the owner of that server.
There you go.
Co-owner technically, but the other guy hasn't shown up in like 2 years. So yeah,
you're the owner now. I think possession is
practically. So it started as it's a Necrons Discord. That's their robot undead faction essentially. It's robot skeleton space. Which is totally not derivative of Terminators, but it became its own thing with a heavy ancient civilization theme. Anyway, I originally it was some YouTuber. I don't know if I really want to say his name, but it was a YouTuber server. It was the only real Necron server at the time, and eventually, after some deliberation, originally there was like a bot wave that was happening that they needed somebody to take care of, and they were like, you know what, hey, Krazaz is a cool guy, let's go make him a moderator. So I became the first moderator, other than like the guy's friend who was never on. And eventually, like, we got some more moderators. We got a whole structure going, and eventually from some scares and something nasty with the original owner, he passed it on as a co-ownership thing between me and one other guy, Rage. And me and Rage owned it for a while, but eventually Rage had his own dealings happen where he would disappear for years on end, and so basically it's just me. But but we're probably the second largest Discord of Necrons. The first one which appeared later, was the subreddit for our Necron tier. They became their own server and eclipsed us, of course, because Reddit is Reddit. Derivative point of talk that the World of Darkness Reddit is very bare.
It's very bare, yeah.
Which is weird to me.
It's surprisingly niche still to this very day. I mean, we've managed to find a good collective of people who've shown interest in it, but one of the reasons I started this server was because World of Darkness was kind of the game nobody really knew about or nobody played. There were very few of us that had experience in World of Darkness. So even still now, it's a very, very niche, role-playing game in the lexicon of games out there. A lot of people go towards D&D or towards Pathfinder or a variety of other games. But until recently, World of Darkness was still a very background game since the end of the 90s, early 2000s. So it's a still evolving community even after 33 years of existing.
But yeah, I eventually it was a lot of moderation duties I've dealt with. I've dealt with trolls. I've dealt with people posting awful things. I've dealt with people questioning our what we do, and we've rebranded a lot, and we've tried to push some initiatives, but it's mostly a very low maintenance thing at this point, so I don't mind focusing elsewhere in my moderation duties, because a lot of the people there are very chill. So yeah, it's just come naturally to me at this point. And when I approached to do storytelling, that's what my original goal was. They were like, "Oh, you have to be moderator first." I'm like, "Let's do it."
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, if you like Warhammer and if you like the Necrons, you can reach out to Krazaz and get involved with that Discord server and delve deeper into the world of Warhammer. But that's not what you're here for. You're here to talk about World of Darkness. So let's get back to talking about World of Darkness. So as a still relatively new player, even though you are kind of expanding into storytelling duties, what bit of the World of Darkness settings, what clan appeals to you most? What's your favorite clan as of this moment with all the study you've done?
Well, playing Nosferatu has gotten me looking deeper into the Nosferatu's background, and so I very much enjoyed that as well. Currently, I'm very much looking into ministry. I've had a lot as a person who's also an archaeologist. I've had a long interest in the background of Egypt and the whole context. I'm not 100% comfortable what they did with their idea of set, but I'm wholly open to rejecting that notion.
Well, they've moved away from it too significantly in 5th edition. It's not like it was in the older days, but yeah.
I'm wholly in the mindset that we can accept that, especially with the ideas of the Camarilla suppressing the idea of the antediluvians. You can fully have kindred who are completely reject the notion of what the antediluvians truly were in the first place. So I have a character in the works that is a ministry that's looking forward to talking about set in the idea of his original context and not whatever kindred might have started the Setites / ministry, because that was just a guy who took a name as far as he's concerned. Which is a great way to look at it, I think, because you can both respect the lore and also dismiss it. So that's what I'm looking at right now. I very much enjoy people playing the Toreador around here. I don't know if I could get into doing it myself, but I've enjoyed every interaction I've had with the Toreador, whether that be Sebastian, Carmen, or even the few I've met in those open RP events. It's very interesting clan to me, and I'm glad that they are the ones in control of the city and not just falling upon the default of, oh, it's Ventrue.
Right. What is there a particular section of lore or a clan or a character that you are especially appealed to and want to look more into? One that maybe you've encountered in in St. Pete or in your studies that you're interested, like going down a rabbit hole? Like, I know my favorite character is Beckett. I have delved into the very many reaches of the Beckett character and kind of the background of him. Is there any particular piece of lore that you are interested in indulging or looking further into outside of the ministry?
I'm definitely curious about the methods behind Beckett's archaeology, as he puts it, because I assume he's a very Indiana Jones inspired
Very,
character,
yes, very much so.
and of course everybody in the archaeological background knows that there's no real archaeology in the Indiana Jones movies. There's one scene where they dig up a tomb, and that's about it. But and it's funny because part of Indiana Jones' like plot at the very beginning when he's in the college uh classroom was like archaeology isn't just running around and doing adventures. The irony being that's what he would do in that movie, but it's like it's mostly just work. But I am a bit interested in that. I did come across that like there's like every 8 years there's like a council or something that's supposed to happen, and 2024 is a year that's supposed to happen, and I'm kind of wanting to hear what happens with that because I had mentioned in Open RP at one point that the Nosferatu representative in there has like a bird face. I
Yep.
don't, and
Cock
I'm
Robin.
like,
Yep.
yeah, and I'm kind of curious about what he's doing and what the other council members are doing. What did they do this council? Is that a thing that
So it's the
Renegade's going to look
Justicars.
into?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Justicars are supposed to be up for a vote again in 2024, and I'm very interested to see if World of Darkness as a whole is going to pursue that at all, or if it's
Mhm.
just something that they're going to gloss over. But with the upcoming Gehenna War book, who's to say? Anything's possible. Maybe there's
Oh
going to
yeah.
be some explanation in there. That's the thing about the meta plot of World of Darkness is they've set some things in motion in the older editions that we're not quite sure if they're going to pick up on and continue with in the newer editions. But
Yeah.
that's the waiting and seeing game with them
Uh,
to see what they do
if
decide to do with it.
if the Gen Con rumors are true about the mechanical implications, I might have to pick up it just for that, especially with that story I wanted to tell, like I mentioned earlier, because
Yeah,
it seems to be trying to explore what older vampires can do.
absolutely.
If the rumors are to be believed, which I have no reason to doubt.
I hope so. I do hope they expand upon elders. They did put a strong focus on the younger vampires, which is good. I mean, it is good since people shouldn't come into the game playing elders right out the gate like they used
Right.
to. It should be a focus on where we're going versus where we've been. But it
Mm-hmm.
would be nice to see them expand upon more about the effects of the beckoning and what elders are up to these days and what the situation is with all that.
Yeah.
But I do have a couple of more questions for you as we're going to start to wrap things up here, but I want to
Mhm.
remind people again of our giveaway. We are giving away a free art piece from Chromatic Creations. Crafty has been generous enough to donate one of these art pieces to After Dark to give away. And so you could be in the running for one of those art pieces by putting the hashtag Crafty in the chat. We're going to make that drawing after we ask these few questions and wrap this whole wonderful interview up. But yeah, just put hashtag Crafty in the chat, and a big thank you to Chromatic Creations for this donation. As somebody who's still getting their feet wet, has had a year now of experience in the world of darkness, what advice would you give to somebody who maybe hasn't experienced the world of darkness before or is just getting into it? What would you advise them if they're coming from a D&D background or a Pathfinder background or something else, or if they're new to TTRPGs as a whole? What would you advise them about exploring and getting into the world of darkness?
So those of you on the server would know I had started a thread and I had discussed this in an admin meeting that we had, is that I'm preparing a new player primer for us to use here on St. Pete, wherever that is hosted, whether it be on the Discord or on the website, we'll figure that out. But essentially, when we had come in and I'd seen this with a few other players and heard about it from players in the past, is that there was kind of a high learning curve if you didn't know exactly what you were doing, and I'd say that there's a need to like not only learn the lexicon but also realize that the lexicon is to a certain extent can be masquerade breaching. There is a certain level of etiquette that you should know, and it's not explicitly said that you should know a certain level of etiquette. Even within the Anarchs, there's a level of etiquette that you should know. Um, and it's more preparing people to face that world and not to just jump in face first into what is otherwise something that could get you into trouble with people who do know what they're doing. Um, and that's one of probably the scariest aspect of playing here at St. Pete by Night. But I think that building this player primer will help a lot of people if those that bother to sit and read the thing, of course. I'm trying to have it be nice and compressed so that people don't have to like see a whole 3-page document of stuff and instead can just click little boxes and see little explanations as they want to expand upon it and close as they will. So yeah, mostly just prepare yourself for consequences. And hell, even if they are dire consequences, at least you learned. And that's something, even if you die, you have ready for your next character, which I don't want to sound like this game is very killy, but it can be if you screw up that bad.
It can be, and it is a very. I mean, it's the world of darkness, not the world of happy shiny puppies, as I've ever said since day one of this server opening. Is that it is a very gritty, dark setting, and I think that the best way to approach a setting like this isn't to jump in and make a splash if you don't have the experience and the understanding of the setting as a whole, but rather to ease your way in. Subtlety, subterfuge, and sitting and watching is your friend. Learn as much as you can. You know, a lot of when you join a new system, a lot of the emphasis is on learning the mechanics. In this game, it's the exact opposite. Take the time and learn the lore. Learn, and it's not the massive lore we're talking about. It's just got to be a base level understanding of the traditions, of what the society's expectations of you are. You know, you can pick up on that stuff as you play, but it's good to have a firm, at least baseline foundation of what it is to be that and how your character fits within that mold of the society. Also, talking to your storytellers, asking questions, constantly putting out there like, what does this mean? What is this? What am I doing? What am I getting into? Rather than expecting that you're just going to know right out the gate. Take time to educate yourself. Take time to learn. It's not as terrifying as it seems. It seems like a lot, but it can be broken down to smaller bite-sized pieces, which is one of the reasons I really endorse this project you're going on with this new player primer, is that it can be simplified, it can be streamlined, and it can be made much more accessible for everybody to really get a base level understanding before walking into a setting where the consequences can be very severe and very dire. So it's just good that we're breaking it down that way. Well, Kraz, I want to say thank you, first off and foremost, for being my guest here tonight. I'm really excited for what you're going to be doing as a storyteller. You're going to be announcing some one-shots soon as the whole school thing is wrapped up, which, again, congratulations on graduating with another degree from college. That's an impressive feat. And we're looking forward to all the incredible things that you're going to be doing on this server, the stories you're going to tell, and the opportunities you're going to provide for new players to get involved and for people to get a taste of what the World of Darkness has to offer and what St. Pete by Night has to offer. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and do the giveaway for tonight. Like I said, Chromatic Creations is offering a free art piece to anybody who put the hashtag crafty into the chat. And so tonight's winner of that art piece is Shapeshifting Traveler Lilith. Congratulations on winning that art piece. We'll put you in touch with Crafty, although you know how to get a hold of her, and you can get a free art piece done of whatever character you choose, whether it be World of Darkness, whether it be St. Pete by Night, whatever the case it is. You have won that art piece, so the two of you can get together and make that happen. But congratulations to you tonight, and enjoy that art piece from Chromatic Creations. Kraz, are there any final thoughts you want to offer? Anything else you'd like to plug or say before we put a bow on this thing tonight?
To anybody who doesn't have a table yet, check out my first one shot, Watchers in the Dark is what I've called it. I'm definitely still getting used to STing. I ran it once with the aforementioned friend group And they surprised me with their creativity, despite the fact that this was their first time playing World of Darkness Vampire at all. So like I'm glad that I got to run it, and I got to have the experience of teaching people the system as well as learning it from this side as well. Thanks everybody for watching. If you want to contact me, ask me any further questions, feel free to DM me. I'm pretty much always online anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're one of the biggest supporters we've had on the streams, on the server. And I can't credit you enough for all the incredible work and like the ideas you've brought to the table, the way you've helped make this server for the better. Whether it was through your play and don't get caught, whether it's been your contributions as a moderator, the future contributions you're going to make as a storyteller. I know that I appreciate it. I know all of the staff appreciates it and all the players appreciate it, and you have been nothing but a shining ray of light and a much needed injection of ideas and creativity to the server. And we are very, very grateful to everything you bring. But thank you so much to my guest, Kraz. I'm Kent. Go follow us on all of the social media listed down below and in the description. And go join us by clicking that Discord link if you're interested in learning more about the World of Darkness, if you're interested in learning about St. Pete, if you want to get in on these one-shots that we've talked about, or maybe even find yourself seated at a table, you can do so by joining our server and becoming a part of our community. But thank you all so much for joining us here for After Dark tonight, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.
This has been a St. Petersburg by Night production. After Dark is produced in agreement with the World of Darkness and Dark Pact. The host for After Dark is Kent. Visit our website at stpbynight.com for more information about all of our productions and how you can become part of our community. Thank you for listening. Until next time, fangs, stakes, and claws out.